What's going on, everybody? Rob here, Trev 2323, brisk 32 degrees or 35 degrees out here in Chicago. I want to do a video on should you ground your air compressor? Should you ground it? There's a difference between grounding and bonding. Okay, they say you don't have to ground your air compressor. You don't have to ground it. Now, I got pipes all the way across the garage, copper pipes all the way across the garage. The electrician's book says you don't have to ground it if you do not have a rubber hose in between your air compressor. Okay, there's a rubber hose in between my air compressor. Okay, the reason being I have a rubber hose in between my air compressor is I don't want all my pipes shaking. So I'd have a rubber hose in between my compressor, 300 psi rubber hose, so when this is little vibrating, you're not hearing the rattling through there. So since I have a rubber hose, I actually have to ground my pipes. You see my pipes are grounded to a solid conduit pipe. This is a ground pipe. It's a ground. That's not a bonding. That's not bonding. That's a ground right there. Right here to right here. The bonding ground is in the box right here. This is a 220 line. So there's two hots and one ground. A black hot, a red hot, and one ground. Now the ground wire goes from here into here. Okay, now I know I got a 10 gauge wire coming to this box. I believe it should be a 10 gauge wire in here, but I got a black hot, a red hot, and a ground. I'm not going to show you how to hook that up to the box. So I know I got a 10 gauge ground in here that goes all the way to the box. Okay, so like I said, it's a rubber pipe. You need to ground your pipes. I'm going to explain that in a little bit. Now this right here is a jumper cable to go from the copper pipe to the solid conduit. And you see I got compression connections in there. Okay, now where does that go? That goes all the way. This conduit right here is pressed in there, goes into the box, and then comes down to right here. See, this is another 6 gauge ground. This is a 6 gauge ground. Now in here, I have the ground wires bonded to the breaker box. The ground wires are bonded to the breaker box. All these green wires in here go all the way to the breaker box, but also all these ground wire here go directly to a 8-foot ground rod into the ground. Now this ground rod, I will tell you, is not connected properly, and I'll tell you why. Because I got to redo it because I was going for aesthetics, where I was gonna go ahead and wire it to the side. But to a ground pole, it has to have the least amount of curves possible directly into the ground. Now this ground pole is going 10 feet or 8 feet deep into the ground, connected to that wire that goes into the bond, which is this wire right here. And I'm gonna tell you why in a bit. Hang with me. And then this right here goes into right here. So this compressor is grounded by the green wire inside to here, but that broke the ground for the pipe. Now I'll tell you I need ground in that copper pipe in a little bit. So this right here, you can buy these from the store. I know I got a green wire all the way to the box, a ground wire all the way to the box. You can buy these testers. They tell you if everything is grounded. That's grounded right there. See, two good wire, a neutral, a hot, and there's no ground. So you can read that in the back. It says what's right. So that is proper right there. Okay, so this goes to my box. Okay, I'm not going to show you how to hook up the box, but this goes underground. This pole goes underground right here, although I have a ground rod right here. Now this right here is PVC, so that isn't the proper ground to use as a ground. You can't put nothing to that to put it into the ground. Okay, so 22 feet later over here, I got PVC that comes up right here. See, PVC that comes up, and I have another, well, it's underneath here. I got another ground rod 8 feet deep, and you can see what's wrong with this. It has to be the shortest point, so this has to, even if I take that slack out, it has to come in here. Now this right here goes in to the end of my connections. that ground rod is only coming to right here. That ground rod is coming to this box right here, connected to this box. But all these are connected solid, and there's a green all the way to the box. There's a green all the way to the box. Okay, the green is your ground. Now let me explain to you why I'm grounded into the ground right there. Why I'm grounded into the ground. If a lightning is gonna strike your house, boom, there's nothing your electric stuff's gonna do to it. It's gonna, that lightning bolt is so powerful, it's gonna do whatever the heck it's gonna do. But say the lightning hits the carport. The lightning hits the carport, this has nothing to do with the box. But there's a magnetic field that it produces, a magnetic field that it produces that will arc and jump to your electricity. You could blow out the lights in the garage, you could blow out the lights in the house, and it'll arc and it'll jump. And that's how it gets into your system. If it jumps, the arc jumps, it could jump to your copper line. And if it jumps to your copper line, you need to get it any surges or overflows into the ground. Not only do you need to get the surges or overflows, the overflow juice, the overflow static electricity, the overflow surge, it's gonna go bam into the ground. But in the same with your wires, your ground all the way to the box, if whatever overflow doesn't go into the ground, will hopefully trip that breaker. And that's why you got the bonding ground. The bonding ground. So if you got the 2 hots right there, say I got the 2 hots on this compressor right here, bam, 2 hots, it's 220, right? And 2 hots, 220, right? I can't just hook the ground into the ground. Nothing's going back to the box. There's nothing. There's no bond to the box. You're actually 2 hots. You need the ground, the green wire, to go through here to go all the way to the box, because if there's a surge in their system or anything anomaly, it's gonna trip the breaker. So that's why you need the bonding ground to the box. But this overflow is for static magnetism in case the lightning strike doesn't necessarily have to hit your house. If the lightning strike hits anywhere else, it could jump and arc to your system, and that's how you want it directly into the ground. And now this right here, this pipe all the way on the other side of the garage goes all the way to the other side and then into the ground. So I'm actually thinking about doing another ground right here to this side into the ground with a 10-foot pole over here. So this way, if it arcs, you need to have the shortest point to the ground. Okay, so that is why people ground stuff. Like, you know, it's overkill to, nobody has these grounded, but if you have big light poles, guess what? Those big light poles are grounded. Now let me go over a little bit else on grounding. Okay, I'm in the basement. I know I got bedhead, but all right, so this is like a pet peeve of mine, because people believe when you hit your outlets or your outlets, and it is true, I give them that, it is true. People ain't overly concerned about bonding as I am. But you see these right here, they have you know, the hot is the dark color right here. This is just a switch, so the neutral actually goes to the light. But there's a ground. You see, they put that green screw on for a reason, for you to ground it to the box. Now you could get pigtails. You get little green pigtails. They're little green wires. They're called pigtails. You can look them up, green ground pigtails. They go to that little piece in the box right there, and they go to this right here. Now if you just screw this in, you look, this ground right here is connected to the body. It is connected to the body, and this body does screw to the box. See, the body screws to the box, so therefore it is considered grounded. It is considered grounded because that little green, or bonded, it's considered bonded because that little green, that little ground, that green is the ground, is screwed into the box right here, so it's considered grounded. But they have that right there to screw into there, and they have another one right here. Okay, now this plug right here has a hot, a neutral, and a ground. Okay, hot, neutral, ground. Okay, but this right here is the ground that should be a pigtail from here to the box, a pigtail from here to the box, So when you screw that in, like I said, if you look on the back, it is connected to the brace. It is connected to the whole unit. So when you screw that in, it's considered grounded. But they put that there for a reason, so you could have a good ground. And I say so you could have a good ground. Now, if I don't hook up stuff myself, I don't consider it a good ground. There's another one right there. See, inside the box, they give you it so you can hit the ground inside the box. Now, this is why if I don't hit it in myself, I don't consider it a good ground, okay? Because you have these to connect to your box. See these little rings right here? You have these to connect to your box. You hit your knockouts. This ain't the size for these knockouts, but you hit your knockouts, you put it through the box and you tighten it up. Okay? I put a right here on this side, I put a screwdriver and I use my wire dikes and I hit that in as hard as possible. Like sometimes if you pull the wire or pull the pipe, you feel it loose. You'll feel it loose, and it's not a good bond if this thing isn't tightened up to the box enough. It is not a good bond. So that's why you see in these boxes right here, GR, ground. That's where your pigtail goes. Your green wire pigtail goes in there and then goes to right here. And part of the reason for that bonding ground is because if there's something wrong with the system and say your neutral is not going back to your box, the ground is at your box and it'll trip the switch. I cannot explain this enough. And like these right here, these screw into the pipe. You really got to bog these down to get this pipe in here to keep the constant bond. Now, if you just slide the pipe in there and say there's enough tension where you don't got to bog it down, it's not a proper ground to consider this a ground. Okay, now I just had somebody tell me that they have the 3 plugs like this. They have the 3 plugs like this, although where they put their internet, it didn't say it was grounded. It didn't say it was grounded. Well, somebody could change the switch and they could screw this into the box. That's probably what happened. They screwed it into the box. They put this in here and said, boom, it's grounded. But they didn't use that tester to check. And apparently somewhere down the line, somebody probably got either Romex that they didn't ground. Now, if you have Romex, they have a little wire in between. There's a little wire in between. There's an old wire I disconnected from my box, but I didn't pull it yet. I could go ahead and show you. But this is why when I buy them, I buy the 3-wire system with the ground. Because everything I run a grounded system. Now, let me show you over here. You can see it, but I bypassed a lot of stuff. So this is an old BX cable, MX cable, right? Hot and neutral. I don't know if you see a hot and neutral, made it close. And this is considered the ground wire. See how thin that ground wire is? That's the bonding ground wire. 2 hots, a hot, a neutral, and this is the bonding ground wire. But what a lot of people do is they don't bond that ground wire. They think it's just an extra wire in there and that it's gonna be, everything's gonna be connected to the box, so it's gonna be okay. Now there's compression fittings like this. See this compression fitting right in here? That's a compression fitting that squeezes around these cables right here that gives you the ground to the box. Now what happens when you squeeze these? They squish in. They squish in where it will give you a bond. It'll give you a bond, but I don't trust that bond. That's why I always run the green to the box with a pigtail. I run the greens to the box with a pigtail and the box to this. So my pigtail in this box, there will be a pigtail coming out and there will be my green wire to here and my green wire to the box. So it's grounded and bonded is how I do it. So if you're I prefer, instead of running this all over the place now, I run just the pipe. I run the pipe and I use a compression fitting on the pipe. I use my compression fittings on the pipe because these compression fittings you could snug down, use some channel locks or some box wrenches, or not box wrenches, what am I looking for? Crescent wrenches, and you could bog these down and really tight and the pipe is not gonna move around. Okay, so either way, that's going over grounding and bonding. For the air compressor, for the 220, it's 10 gauge line that I use, 10 gauge wire. And good and bad, I couldn't find 10 gauge solid anywhere. All I found is 10 gauge wire, the stranded. Okay, so I used the 10 gauge stranded. I made sure all the connections were good. But pulling the 10 gauge through, it was easier with the stranded than it was with the, than it would have been with the solid. So either way, I got to sneeze real fast. Okay, now this right here, see that's grounded? This is considered grounded, but you use some channel locks or you use something and you get this in there tight where if something moves around, if you move it, it's not gonna jiggle loose. Another thing, I'm sorry, one thing, I put that 8-foot ground pole into the ground at the garage and the ground pole into the ground by the house. Our unit, our system in the house is actually grounded to the water line. That's how it was built. It's grounded to the water line also. Okay, so this is a grounded system. But dang, I forgot where I was going with this. Like, well, the other one, the other pipe all the way on the other side of the garage is for a magnetic field. When the lightning hits, it throws out a magnetic field. You want the overflow to go into ground, hopefully not into your system. It's gonna hit your house, it's gonna hit your house. You just, hopefully all your circuits work and everything where it gets out the system. Oh, another thing, with the ground, why I put the 8-foot ground stakes in. You know when they run your cable, they put your cable and they ground it to the pipes coming out the ground to the garage. Well, on this house, all these older houses, if they were, somebody was not legitimate, they were trying to cut the budget, and it could have been code back then, but I don't ever think Romex was code in Chicago. The conduit came out of underneath the house into the ground, maybe only a foot, and then from the garage into the ground, maybe only a foot, and then that's where the ground for the cable was connected to that. But that wasn't a proper ground. I mean, it was to a box. It was to a box. And it was into that box connects into the circuit breaker, right? But if there was a lightning strike, it wasn't a proper, not even the lightning strike. Let me get the magnetic field from a lightning strike. Who knows how far it's going to go, but the magnetic field's not going to overflow that as good as an 8-foot round into the ground. And that little 6-gauge wire, it doesn't have to be shielded wire. You could go into home improvement, the 6-gauge wire, because the magnetic field goes so fast, it rides on the outside of the wire anyway. So it'll burn all this off. It rides on the outside. So that's why all you use is a 6-gauge wire. It's the 6-gauge for the grounding wire. All right. Either way, sorry for talking your ear off. I swear by, if you're gonna do it conduit. Do it solid. Make sure those are hit in really tight. If these are all hitting really tight, it is a solid ground. Not like the other guy with the computer that they tested it and he has one of these, but he doesn't have a solid ground. So somewhere in his line, he has some of this that's not hit all the way tight. He has some of that that's not hit all the way tight. These weren't bogged down, connected right. Or that old kind of wire with the little tiny teeny skinny ground that cracks off a lot, so that could have cracked when somebody was pulling it, or that right there is not grounded to the ground in the box. All right, so that's, anytime if you're going to change anything or run it, just run it properly, run it right. I always say, don't consider all the pipes in your house are gonna be the ground them all together. You're running a new line anyways, bond them all together. In the pipes, everything to the circuit box, that's all it's called the ground, but it's like bonding all your pipes in your house together, bonding them. Do your boiler pipes need to be grounded? No, they don't need to be grounded. Do your water pipes need to be grounded? Yes, your water pipes need to be grounded. One thing that I learned also is doing this big research, because I was running this 220 air compressor, is that in between your water pipes, I didn't know, in between your water pipes, you're supposed to have like that jumper cable I got from the copper pipe to the air pipe to the conduit. That should be one between your hot and your cold also. All right, either way, subscribe, like, and share.